Hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 1111 Matrix Code Revealed. As always, I'm your host, Garrett King. Well, folks, this is going to be the last video that I record for the year 2023. Won't be the last video ever, but it will be the last video for this year. Thankfully, I'm getting the whole day to record. I have the day off, which is great, and very much needed. My husband and I, we've just been working some crazy hours this year, and I mean, as you know, I've only been able to put out, a video about once a month, just because I've been working so much, and, by the end of the day, I'm just so exhausted that I just, don't even have the time or the energy to record. But thankfully had some days off with the holiday, and I have today off, go back to work tomorrow, work for 2 days, and then have the weekend off. And New Year's, thank God. So yeah, it's been nice. Before I really dive into today's video, I just want to say that I hope you all had a great holiday. Hope you got to spend some much needed time with friends and family, and just got a chance to relax yourselves. I know it was definitely needed here in our household. We had a great Christmas. We didn't go anywhere. We just basically kicked it here with the dogs and enjoyed the day. We had a great dinner. We opened presents. And yeah, I mean, we just really enjoyed it, and it was just nice to be able to relax and not have to think about, work or anything like that. And it was just great. Yeah. So why don't we just go ahead and jump into this video? What I'm going to show you guys today is some really interesting number connections. And we're going to look at, again, we're going to look at the Torah. We're going to look at pi. We're going to look at the number pi and these number connections. I mean, they're so, I don't even know how to say this. These connections are so far beyond that I just don't even know how anybody could question these connections, because I mean, it's so obvious that this was done by design. It's so obvious to me that we do live in a digital world, that numbers run through everything. It's all connected, just as we're all connected. And when you start seeing these connections again, there's just really no denying how all of this just fits. And it fits so perfectly, and how it's all encoded. I mean, it's so obvious that it's a code, as you're going to see. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and jump into this. Now, one thing I do want to say very quickly before I go any further is I have tried recording this video like 15 times today, and every time I've started, I either stumble, on my words, or my cell phone rings. I mean, there's just always been like some kind of disruption. So I don't know if it's because, tonight's going to be a full moon. I have no idea, but yeah, it's been a rough start trying to get this video started. So I've just decided that at this point, if I fuck up somewhere along the way, I'm just leaving it in. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at this. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at at Genesis, the book of Genesis, and we're going to examine the number of characters, okay, in Genesis. Now, not just Genesis 1, but I mean all of Genesis. And then we're going to look at Exodus and go from there, okay? Now, as you can see on the screen, there's a lot of numbers here, and let me just kind of start breaking this down for you. And then there's a big black box here that's covering up a bunch of information that I'm going to show you, but I don't want you seeing it until I start talking and revealing it. Okay, so right here, as you can see, I have Genesis. The number of character letters in Genesis is 78,064. Okay? That's not words. That's just individual letters that make up the entire book of Genesis. So to prove this, we're going to come over here to the JLA Tanakh program. I'm going to click on Genesis, open it up. I'm going to say select all. So it's just going to select everything. And then we're going to go to the total values. And as hopefully you can see this on screen, but letters, that's what we're looking at. The number of letters is 78,064. Okay. 78064. It's the same number I have right here. Now, I kind of want to explain this. When I did the video about the missing letter, okay, and being Aleph at the very beginning of the Torah, okay, if we add that letter to the very beginning of Genesis, that means that number is going to shift, okay? So 78064 would now become 78065. But keep one thing in mind. The phrase that is derived from the number 1111, okay? And I talked about this last time. I've talked about it numerous times. But that phrase, the beginning is the end, and the end is the beginning. What is that telling us exactly? It's telling us that Aleph can be placed at the beginning of the Torah or at the end of the Torah. Okay? It's interchangeable. It can shift. All right? We'll look at that more here in just a second. But the way we're looking at it right now, we're going to look at it with Aleph being at the end of the Torah. So with it being at the end of the Torah, the character letters that make up Genesis will still be 78,064. Okay? Now, when we take that number, the number of letters that is in Genesis, and we search for that number in pi, it shows up at the 222, how would you say that exactly? The 222,029th position. I guess that's how you would say that. So yeah, when you think of pi, which is a never-ending number, it starts with 3, then it has a decimal, and then it's 1, 4, or something, and it just goes on and on and on into infinity. It never stops, okay? So when we search that number, which we're going to do, let's go ahead and copy that, and I'll show you exactly how all of this was found. Okay, so close your ad. Okay, so this is the pi search page, and you guys can search for this. You can pull it up. Basically, right here's the address. Hopefully you can see that. It's www.angio.net/pi/. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to paste that number in, 78064, and do a search. Okay, finds it really quick. Now it says the string of numbers, that's what that is. It's a string of numbers. It occurs at position 22222029. I'm just going to start saying it like that. I think it's easier to say it that way. So that's the first occurrence of the number, okay? Right here, 222029. Now, what's interesting about this number, this position, is that this number, 222029, is a prime number, okay? So the question kind of becomes, what is the prime number before that one, and what's the prime number after that? Okay. So if we look, the prime number that comes before it is 222023. Okay. And the next prime number after 222029 will be 222041. Okay. So we're looking at prime numbers, and when I say the position in pi, so let's look at this. So the first position, 222023. What that means is that this number right here, this number 2 that I have highlighted here, and let me see if I can zoom in on this. Okay, this number 2 appears at this position in pi. That means that it is the 222,023rd number in the string. Okay? And I've been noticing here lately that sometimes when I go to say letter, I say number, and when I go to say number, I say letter. I think it's because I'm almost conditioned now to see them as being one and the same. It's weird. But anyway. So, and then the number that we searched, 78064, the 7 is the beginning of that. And so it appears at this position, 222029. And then with this one being the last prime, that's where the 7 is. That 7 is in this position, 222041. So really what we're looking at here, even though I have this entire string of numbers, we're really examining the ones I have highlighted here in green. Because the positions, all 3 positions are prime numbers. And we're looking at everything that's encompassed within that string. Now, here's where things start getting very interesting. The first position starts with a 2, and if we start looking at the string of numbers, we see that we have the very beginning, the number 22. Now, 22 is the number of Hebrew letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Now, there's 5 additional letters that they're called the final letters. Those are the same letters as the, I've said this before, but there's 5 additional letters, but those letters are essentially the same letters that are in the original 22. They just appear differently when they show up at the end of a word, okay? So, we have the number 22 representing the Hebrew alphabet. Now, directly after that, we have a double 37. Okay? Now, as you know, and as I've talked about numerous times, the number 37 is prevalent in the 1111 matrix code, and it's prevalent in the Torah. We know that the number 37 is the value of Jesus in Hebrew ordinal Gematria. The mirror reflection of that, 73, is the value of Christ in Hebrew ordinal Gematria. But there's something deeply encoded here that is going to tie back into the last video, which is where I talked about this whole grid and putting the entire Torah, if you will, 37 across, and then what was it, I think it was 8,238 lines down. It created this structure. But here's one of the connections. So this is 37 across, and it's 37 down. It's 37 by 37. And as I've shown you and demonstrated multiple times, 37 times 37 is 1369. It's the value of Jesus in matrix gematria. Okay? And we get the sun symbol, which again is a reference to Jesus. So let's go back here. All right, so let's start pulling this down here. Okay, so we talked about 22 is the number of Hebrew letters in the alphabet, and then we have 37. Now I talked about 37 times 37 equaling 1369 being the value of Jesus in matrix gematria. But let's look at something else here. So 3737 plus its mirror opposite. Now this is important because we're going to be looking at mirror opposites and mirror reflections today. So we take 3737 plus 7373 and we get essentially 1111. Okay, it's 11,110. But if we follow the clues in the 1111 matrix code where you take the last 4 digits and you add the remaining, this one would jump to the end and we would have 1111, which again produces that phrase, the beginning is the end and the end is the beginning. Okay? Now, there's something else here. So if we look at these numbers, 3737, and we were to multiply those together in that sequence, okay? So 3 times 7 times 3 times 7 equals 441. Now, keep in mind, 441 is a mirror reflection of 144. Okay? And 144 is the value of Lord Jesus Christ in Hebrew ordinal gematria. Not only that, let's go back to over here. If you recall this little grid that I showed you guys, when you take an 11 by 11 multiplication table and we form the cross in the center, and we simply take each one of those and go out every direction, as I've shown you, the total will be 144 every single time, okay? So we can just keep going all the way till we get to the edge, and then it starts moving around the board, okay? And every single time, it's 144. Okay, until it comes back to its original position in the corner. Okay, and then it comes inwards. And now we have the opposite of the cross, this empty space here. And then as it continues, it's always going to be 144. Okay, until it gets to its final resting position, which is right here. Okay, and again, it's Lord Jesus Christ in Hebrew ordinal gematria. Okay, so with that being said, let's look at the number of characters in Genesis 78064, and then look at the numbers directly after it. 1, 4, 4. Okay, 144. Now, here's where you're going to start seeing the deeply encoded structure of this, and that it is clearly by design and clearly done by someone or something with a pure mathematical mind, okay? So, if we take 441 and multiply it by 144, okay, we get 63504. 63504. Okay. Now, what happens when we take 63504 and add each one of these numbers up here that make up the total letter or character letters of Genesis and add them to that number individually? Okay. So 63504 plus 7 plus 8 plus 0 plus 6 plus 4 gives us the number 63529. 63529, which just so happens to be the exact number of character letters in Exodus, the next book in the Torah. Okay. Interesting, right? Now, I talked about mirror reflections or the mirror opposite of numbers. I want to show you something. So, Exodus, this number, 63529, its position in pi is 86098. So let's go ahead and pull that up again. 86098. Nope, sorry. We're doing the wrong thing. Telling you, I'm making all kinds of mistakes today. Okay, so 63529. That's the number we're searching in pi. Okay. It appears at position 86098. Let's see if I can zoom in on that. Okay. So this number, the number of character letters in Exodus, when you search for that number in pi, it appears at this position, 86098. Now, what's interesting about that number is this. Let's minimize that. And look right here. Okay, I've made it big because I want you guys to be able to see this. When you take this number and simply rotate it upside down, it's the exact same number. Okay? It's not a palindrome because it's not reading the same forwards and backwards. It's literally the same when rotated 180 degrees. 86098. Okay? Put it back at 0, and it's the same. 86098. It's interesting. Okay. Now, there's some other very interesting things going on here. So directly after 144, we have this number, 9565. Okay. So when we take 441 times 144, remember we got 63504, and then we added the numbers from Genesis. Well, now when we take 63504 and add 9565, these four digits right here, we also get 63529, the same letters in Exodus. But there's a 7 left over. Okay? Now, this is where I'm going to start showing you how deeply encoded this is. Okay. When we look at all of the digits after Genesis, starting with 1 and going to the 7, which is where the prime number position was, and we add each one of those up individually. So 1 plus 4 plus 4 plus 9 plus 5 plus 6 plus 5 plus 7 equals 41. And 41 is the value of Elohim in Hebrew ordinal Gematria. Okay? It's like a signature. But there's something else that is hidden right here in plain sight. You just have to know how to find it. Okay? Now, I want to show you something here. Let's move this over like that. And zoom in on this. So in Hebrew, back in this time period, they used the alphabet also for their numbers. Okay, and that's how we get Gematria. And I got to take a drink of my energy drink. My mouth is getting dry. So, with that being said, let's look at this. So we know that Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, is the value of 1. And Yud is the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So 1 in 10 is 11. Okay? That's how they would write the number 11 down. It would be, well, you'd have to read it from right to left, but it would be Yud and Aleph. Okay? That would be the number 11. And just to prove this, folks, just to prove that I'm not, blowing smoke up your ass, let me just show you this. So let's go to Google Translate. And let's change this to Hebrew. Okay, and we're going to put in Yud and Aleph. And as you can see, it's showing us it's the number 11. Okay, so now we're going to do Yud and Bet. It's the number 12, and so on. Okay, so that's how they would write these numbers. I almost said letters, but that's they would use the letters to write the numbers. But pay very close attention to something here. So it's Yud, Aleph, Yud, Bet, Yud, Gimel, Yud, Dalet, and then suddenly it changes. Okay? 15 and 16 are represented in a different way. But then strangely, when you get to 17, it goes back to starting with Yud. So why are these two different than the rest of the other sequence? Well, they say it's because they didn't want to start forming the holy name when they were trying to start, or when they were trying to write letters. Okay? So, with that in mind, let's put this down here. And I want you to look at something here. So 9565. This is extraordinary, folks. Watch this. So, this letter, I think it's called Tet, T-E-T. So you would have 9565, but remember, Hebrew is read from right to left. So when we see the letters written like this, that's each letter individually, but when you would read it in Hebrew, you would read it this direction. Okay. So with this letter at the very beginning, and we see over here that all the other letters start with Yud except for 15 and 16, it's alluding to the fact that this word is encoded as Yahweh. Okay? It's telling us that we can change that letter. And we have the name Yahweh. Okay? Encoded right in the center of Elohim. Well, not so much in the center, but at least within the value of Elohim. It's extraordinary. Because Tet is the 9th letter, Hey is the 5th letter, Vav is the 6th letter, and again, Hey is the 5th letter. Okay? We're literally seeing Elohim encoded in this. But it's encoded. Literally, it's a code. You have to know. You have to look at the numbers and make that connection to know this is the name of Yahweh contained within the value of Elohim. Now, what I was saying about Aleph. When we go back up here to Genesis, having 78,064 character letters, if we go back to the video that I talked about where I talked about a missing letter in Genesis and how I thought that missing letter was Aleph, and how the clues tell us that the beginning is the end and the end is the beginning, well, with Aleph at the beginning, this number would change, okay? But if it's simply moved to the end, then Genesis, the value, or the character letters, not value, the character letters of Genesis stay the same. It's interchangeable. It can be moved. And that's, again, exactly why it's being told to us the beginning is the end and the end is the beginning. Okay? We can move the beginning to the end. When we do that, this is the last verse in Genesis, or not in Genesis, but in the Torah, the complete Torah. So the last verse. And it translates, "And to all the strong hand and to all the great terror that Moses did in the eyes of Israel." Okay? Having Aleph at the end. Let's show you this. Okay? "And to all the strong hand and to all the great terror that Moses did in the eyes of Israel." If we were to move Aleph from the end to the beginning, the translation stays the same. It simply does not change. Again, further showing us that that letter can move positions because it is the beginning and it is the end. Okay? All right. Now, let's move on to Leviticus. Now, this is crazy, folks. This is crazy. Now, the number of character letters in Leviticus is 44,790. Okay? So let's prove this by coming over here, going to Leviticus, and selecting all. And hopefully you guys can see this. But 44,790. That's the number of letters in Leviticus. Okay. Now, its position, that this number, 44790, the position that the first 4 falls in pi is 39,641. It is not a prime number. But this is where we're going to get into mirror reflections, okay? So there's something called base 6 conversion. And let's pull this up here. Okay. So we're going to look at decimal to base 6. Okay, so 44790, that would be our decimal. Almost said decibel. Decibel number. Okay, so 44790, we put it in. We're going to convert it to base 6. And the number is 543,210. Okay, 543,210. All right. Now, okay. So we're going to take that number 543,210. And again, we're talking about mirror reflections or mirror opposites. So if we search for the mirror opposite of 543,210, which is 012345, over here in the pi search page, 012345, you can see that its position is 447,855. Okay, that's what I have right here, 447,855. Now remember, folks, these are just strings of numbers. Okay, it's up to us to look at the string and basically hack or decode the numbers. So if we were to take 44785 and then add the next 5 like this, 44785 plus 5, it would equal 44790, the same number of letters in Leviticus. Okay, I mean, this encoding goes deep. And keep in mind, this is in the number of pi. It's an infinite number. And it's all encoded. So far, this is all encoded in this. Now, this number, the first number, 44790. Okay. It appears in pi at that position, 39,641. Now check this out. So the root number of 39641 is 23. Okay. Now we know this because simply, now think about something here. I'm saying root number, I'm not saying the reduced number. So the root number is 3 plus 9 plus 6 plus 4 plus 1 is 23. Okay. The reduced number would be 2 plus 3 is 5. But we're just looking at the root number, 23. Now, when we take 23 and divide that into the base 6 conversion number, we get 23617. And again, folks, we're looking at the encoding. It's just a string of numbers. But when you take 2361 and then add 7, we get 2368, which is the value of Jesus Christ in Greek Gematria. Now, what are the chances, folks? What are the chances? Okay. Now, again, I know what people are going to say. Some people are going to sit here and say, well, you're just manipulating the numbers. I'm not. The numbers are already there. And they're in a string, a perfect string, one right after the other. Okay? If I was manipulating the numbers, I would sit here and, again, jump from, say, this 7 over to this 4, back to this 7, back over to this 9, with no real reason for doing it. That would be manipulating the numbers. That would be me making the numbers do what I want them to do in order to achieve a certain result. These numbers that I'm showing you are lined up, okay, and using a mathematical formula to achieve the end result that's already there. It already exists. Okay? Because 23617, that's the result of 543,210 divided by 23 is 23617. Okay? That is the result. It's actually bigger than that. It's 23617 decimal, and then the string goes on. But we're looking at just the numbers before the decimal point. And again, it's knowing what to do with the numbers. It's just extraordinary, folks, that this is encoded and reveals itself in the number of pi. An infinite number has no end. And we're seeing these deep, deep connections to a book that is clearly mathematical. Now, this is going to continue. I have no doubts that it's going to continue into Numbers and Deuteronomy. So I'm going to keep exploring this and see what shows up. But I can almost guarantee you these same number connections are going to show up in the last 2 books of the Torah. And when I find those connections, that will be the next video. Also, in the meantime, I'm exploring this idea, this concept that I don't even really know how to say it, but for some reason, I cannot shake this feeling that God, or the consciousness of God, is water. Okay? And I say that for many different reasons. I say that because our body is, the majority of our body is made up of water. Now, I've heard different numbers. I've heard some people say, 70% of you is water. I've heard people say 80%. But a large portion of our bodies is made up of water. We can't live without it. And that, in connection with, that encoding in our DNA, God eternal within the body, well, that also makes sense when you think of water inside of our body. When you think of the earth is made up mostly of water, there's more water than there is land mass. When you think of the things in the Bible, what was it in Genesis? What was it that cleansed the earth? It was water. That when God flooded the earth, it was water. Water. That was the flood. Not only that, simply the name, and I've shown you guys this before, Google Translate. If I can pull it up here. So when you look at, let's change this to Hebrew. Whoops, that's not what I want. When you look at the name Elohim, come on, type it in. Okay, Elohim means God. Now, El, Aleph, and Lamed is also representation or the name of God, El. But I've talked about this. It's interesting to me that the last 3 letters of Elohim make up the word the sea. The sea. And then if we get rid of hey, it's simply sea. I've talked about this before. When you add hey at the beginning of a word, it changes that word to the. Okay, so we have sea, we add hey, it's the sea. Not only that, hey by itself means God. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Water is talked about a lot in the Bible. Jesus supposedly walked on water. The rain, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And, it's just, I can't get past this idea that water contains our memories. It contains, I think about this experiment that I saw, I think it was on David Icke's, I want to say it was his Facebook or his Instagram. It was just a very brief thing where he was talking about this woman who, I think she took like a bowl of water or some kind of container of water, and she said something to it like, do you know who I am, or do you know my name, or something like that. She took that water and then she froze it. And when she took it out, frozen in the water was her initials of her name. And not just her initials, it was in there. It was frozen in the water in exactly the same way that she would sign her name. And it was just, her first and last, the initials of her first and last name. But it was frozen in the water. Exactly the way that she wrote her name, because she just used her first and last, the first and last letter of the names. No, sorry, I'm saying that wrong. The first letter of her first and last name, she wrote her initials. That's how she signed her name. And that's how it was in the ice. And then it said something, and I don't remember this because I just briefly saw it when I was scrolling through. She said something about, I think she said, can you show me an angel or something like that? She did it again. She set it to the water. She put the water in, I guess, her freezer, froze it, took it out, and frozen in the ice was an angel. It's as though the water was listening to her. Now, another reason that I have this idea is I think it was a Japanese researcher who was looking at ice crystals when they were frozen. And when you subject water to, certain phrases like love, hate, whatever, the water that was subjected to the word love, it's the crystals that it formed were just beautiful. The ones that were subjected to the word hate were just so disorganized. It just looked like a conglomerate. There's another experiment, it's not experience, but experiment, I think, done the same way with rice. And maybe the rice was put in water. I can't remember. I think it was actually cooked rice. And I'm sorry if I'm getting, some of this wrong, but the gist of it was, the rice that was put in a jar, 3 separate jars. One said love. I think the other one said hate. and the last one didn't say anything at all. And every day, whoever, I can't remember the person's name, but they went up to the jar and said, "I love you," to the one that said love. To the one that said hate, they said, "I hate you." And the last one, they completely ignored. Okay. So after, I can't remember if it was like a week or 30 days, however long the experiment was, the one that they said, "I love you" to, the rice looked pristine, like the day it was put into the jar. The one that they said hate, or that they hated, the rice was like turning black and moldy. And then the last one that they just ignored was kind of a combination of the other two. So again, showing that our words have an effect on our environment. It has effect on other people. And when you think of our bodies containing water, and then the things that, some people like, if someone says something hateful to you, is that affecting the water within your body? If you also think about it, water takes on the shape of any container that it's placed into. So pour water into a bowl, it's taking on the shape of the bowl. Pour it into some container in the shape of, say, like a gingerbread man, it's taking on the shape of a gingerbread man. Think about us. We're containers, okay? And water is inside of us. Think back to Genesis, let us create man in our image. Is that being done so through the container that the water that is inside of us is placed into, our bodies? It's an interesting concept. It's just something I'm working on. Something I'm researching, seeing what else I can find. I even bought it's supposed to show up today, a microscope, because I kind of want to explore looking at ice crystals through a microscope and try some of these experiments using words to see if I can affect how the ice crystals are going to form when they're frozen. And I'll bring you guys the results, after I've completed that. But it is something I'm working on. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes of it. All right. I think that's going to be it for this time. Hope you guys found this interesting. Again, I'm going to finish out the Torah and look at the books Numbers and Deuteronomy and see what number connections there. I can guarantee you, folks, there's going to be connections. I mean, in the first 3 books already, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, there is some kind of connection between all 3 of those and pi. And I guarantee you that it will be the same in Numbers and Deuteronomy. I just know it. I don't know how I know it, but I just know it. It's a feeling. It's a feeling I have. So, okay, that's going to be it for this time. And again, I hope you guys had a great holiday, and the next time you see me, it will be 2024. So I hope you all have a wonderful new year with lots and lots of good things happening for each and every single one of you. Until we talk again, I hope you all take care, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.